to share with you the new things that are coming from the product. Obviously, the product is not yet released, so it's just a preview for our partner. The idea is to share with you a little bit early that the real launch of the new version. Nathan is our head engineer, so he's the right person to introduce you the new version. From my side, no more words here, so Nathan, you're welcome.
Thanks, Emanuele. Okay. I know we have a few more people still coming in, but welcome to our Entando 7.2 preview. I know some of the names, a lot of the names here, some of our favorite partners are joining us. So if you're joining us on the call or watching the recording, welcome to the preview. As Emanuele said, this is a preview, not quite ready to release 7.2. I'll talk about the status of that in a second. But wanted to give our partners a glimpse of what's coming in 7.2. We prefer that you don't get surprised. I've been in your shoes, and it's best if our partners know what's coming before our clients do, because then they ask you questions and you want to have answers. So the goal today is to get you some of those answers on what 7.2 includes and a little bit of the forecast of what's coming next. I don't have an hour presentation for you, so feel free to, if you have questions, feel free to drop those in chat and I'll address those towards the end, okay? All right, so let's start with kind of the agenda. So let me review a little bit of the landscape for Entando. We'll talk about what's new in 7.2. That'll be most of the meeting. A little bit of a demo for you and on a couple of the new major features. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's coming next in Entando. All right, so the landscape hasn't changed a lot since we last spoke. Some of you, I believe, were on our 7.1 preview a few months ago. These are the latest technology trends from Gartner. You know, we're big fans of Gartner analysts, and the space we fit in. They every year they come out with the top strategic technology trends that they see coming, and we fit in the space of cloud native and composable, right? So that language of composability, the ability to assemble applications on the fly, that architectural style, that language has really been adopted a lot more in the last year. So we've been using that language for a while. We've been in this space for as long as we started Entando 6, almost 4 years now. We've been playing this game, but we shifted our language to using that term a bit about last summer, and we're seeing that being adopted quite a bit. So there's a few quotes from Gartner. I'll leave them in the slides for you. They think that you're partners of Entando, so hopefully you believe in this message as well. There's a strong place for a composable approach in the business. There's still pro code work to be done. There's still development to be done. And even though the low code, no code tools are out there, a composable approach that enables developers and creating teams to work is really important. And so that composable approach has major benefits, and these are some of the quotes from Gartner on that. And so we definitely fall into that space. Many of you probably saw this slide from late last year when we were added into one of the new hype cycles. We are listed as a sample vendor. Early in the adoption curve, if we had to draw this curve today, it would probably be a little further up this initial slope. But we were mentioned, and that's nice that we were mentioned in this hype cycle for cloud platform services. It's one more indication that this composable approach is important, and a lot of people are adopting it. And I will say, you know, I'm in a lot of pre-sales conversations. As Emanuele said, I'm the head of engineering, but I also assist in pre-sales meetings here, both in North America and sometimes also in Europe. And more we're seeing that this idea of composability is one that people are familiar with. So it's also gaining some mind share. All right, so I just threw the slide in there to make sure we all have the same language around composability. What is a composable business application? Orchestration, one of the new major features is in this area. We have some new things to show you with the Entando Hub. That's around orchestration. Of course, that's the way you can take those independently deployable business capabilities, PBCs, individual components, solution templates. You can use those and you can deploy them. So we are continuing to innovate and refine, in some cases, our implementation of that catalog, the hub, which allows you to do that orchestration. That also results in changes to the application, to the app builder, to our app engine. So we'll talk about some of those things as well. Both of those elements, orchestration and independence, means that you can support multiple custom experiences. And I'll show you a little bit of that. The second major feature I'll talk about is in multi-tenancy. That's also a way to use your investment in an Entando application and do more with it. So it's related to this. It's definitely in this kind of being able to recompose your application on the fly, provide multiple experiences at lower cost. So it's definitely an enterprise element, and we'll talk about that as well. Okay. You know that we're investing in our partners. This is an older slide, but we are trying to build the best composition platform out there. We are open source. In the vendors that were mentioned by Gartner last year, we were the only open source option. The others were closed source. And so we're trying to build the open source option in this space and enable our partners to build a catalog. So in that catalog is what we'll talk about some as well, as I mentioned. So sometimes we have different diagrams for this, but that goal of enabling our partners to do more in this space of application composition is still very much our DNA at Entando. All right, this is a bit of a journey. This is where we are. A lot of little bullets here. We're way out here in 2023. 7.2 release is pending. We're looking for a next release in 7.3 for 7.3 later this year, and that'll be part of the forecast I'll talk to you about a little bit as well. All right, so that's enough probably on the landscape. Hopefully most of that was familiar to you. That's why I went through it kind of quickly. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to drop those into the chat. All right, so what's new in 7.2? I'm going to show you a couple pieces here. So first, we have the next iteration on the Entando Hub itself. We're calling that Entando Hub 3. Kind of in some internal versioning there. It's not a product that's versioned quite the same way, but if you've got a hub installed, it's probably Entando Hub 2. What we have running on Entando.com, on hubentando.com is a version 2.2. So that's kind of the internal versioning of that, but it is version 3, which has been re-architected in some ways, and I'll show you some of those new features here in a demo. Second major feature is around multi-tenancy. So I know we have some partners on the call that have dealt with this. We've done a couple multi-tenancy implementations in the last couple of years. And we've taken those lessons we learned from real world experience with our clients and our partners, and we've applied that to the platform to make it possible for you to do a multi-tenancy implementation without a lot of help from us. So I'll show you what that looks like, what it means, what the limitations are, what it's good for. That's one of my main goals. So those two main features, I want to make sure you understand what's included in those pieces. We've also done some work on the infrastructure. No surprise, on every release, we look at our dependencies, we look at speeding things up, that kind of thing. So we've added support in the last quarter for Kubernetes 1.24 and 1.25. We'll be adding 1.26 pretty soon. I believe you should know that we do a rolling window on Kubernetes. They do every 6-month-ish releases. So we support the current 3 active versions of Kubernetes. So right now it's 1.23 to 1.25. I did want to point out, many of you, I believe, have been invited to our new knowledge base. This is something we've been working on for a while. This is a landing page on Entando.com. It is permissioned. I believe somebody from each of our partners has been invited to be part of this. Some of our clients are in here as well. This is meant to be one place you can go check and say, oh yeah, what is the compatibility matrix for a given version of Entando? What are the current fixes that are available? How do I install and upgrade 7.1? We're using this as a place to collect a lot of that information. It's connected to our customer portal for managing subscriptions for our customers, but it also now has a lot of information here. And very soon we'll have the 7.2 version out here with the documentation, the tutorials, compatibility statements, all that. So I wanted to just call that out. That is available to you. You should have received emails on that or already have access to it. So that is something for you to be aware of. All right, so we'll go to that in a second. So Kubernetes 1.24 and 1.25. Over the course of 7.1, we issued 6 actually patch releases on 7.1. As a result of a bunch of lessons we learned from clients and partners, a lot of performance things, and those are all folded into 7.2. Hopefully you would expect, and it's what we're doing, that as we fix bugs on or make improvements in some cases on the current production version of Entando, which as of today is still Entando 7.1, we're also bringing all those changes forward into the next version of Entando. So Entando 7.2 has all those fixes. Some of those came out. In fact, 7.16 just came out last week. It's not quite announced yet, but a couple more things are in there that'll come out with Entando 7.2 at kind of the same time as Entando 7.2. a lot of performance fixes, a bunch of usability enhancements. Those are all folded into Entando 7.2. One major change here, and we'll send out the release notes to all of you when they're published. We are switching over the runtime for the app engine to Apache Tomcat. That made it much easier to do the multi-tenancy implementation. It's also faster, so that's one of the performance enhancements. I want you to be aware of that. Wildfly EAP still supported for Entando 7.2, but deprecated now, and that'll be noted in the release notes. That's a couple of the changes that you'll be seeing. We've also upgraded our Keycloak integration. If you install a brand new Entando 7.2, you will be getting Keycloak 18 or the corresponding Red Hat SSO, which is version 7.6. We are using the Wildfly image for now. We would like to switch to Quarkus at some point because it's even faster and lighter, but for now it's on Wildfly because of some of the work that we already had in place on that. Okay, that's on the infrastructure side. Status, we will be releasing this soon. We are in the final QE testing phase. A couple more tickets we want to include for you. A bit of documentation to finish up, and then that should be coming out here in the next week or two is the goal. Okay, so that's your status. All right, let's get into the features so you can understand some of the new stuff that we're working on, and I'll do a little bit of a demo on both of these. All right, so Entando Hub 3. The major new feature here is the ability to provide private catalogs. If you go to hubentando.com, which I mentioned is our older version of the hub right now, this guy, my tab is sliding around. This guy's public. Once you publish an entry, any of these things in here, some from us, some from our partners, hopefully on the probably on the call. Once you publish them, anybody can see them. Right? This is a very visible site. It's got organizations. You have to log in to manage them. It's got good security around that. But the catalog itself, once you publish an entry in this catalog, it is visible to anyone. The new feature is to be able to provide private catalogs in the same Entando Hub instance, the ability to say, well, this catalog requires some permissions. Only certain people can access it. Along with that, if I have an app builder and I want to pull entries from that catalog into my app builder, I need a way to secure that. So we're using API tokens. If you're familiar with GitHub tokens or Atlassian tokens, it's a very similar design. You can create an API token and use that to secure access from the app builder or from the Entando CLI. And this is meant to provide a secure option. So one use case for us would be on our Cloud Hub, we could offer to our partners, hey, would you like to have a page with a private catalog on Entando.com where you can put your catalog of components and PPCs, and you can share them with your clients. Another use case would be some of our larger clients. They want to have their own. They'll have their own hub instance, but maybe they want to have a private catalog for certain groups. Maybe they want to give access to that to a particular partner, or one team has some things that's not quite ready to publish to the world, but they want to share it. So that's another use case. It also means you can do some white labeling. So you can also reskin it a bit, put some different content on it. You can do a few things with it. So that's also in the mix. Some of those, the white labeling part is still probably going to come out in a Hub 3.2. But I will say one of the advantages of this componentized, composable model is we can release a new version of the hub without releasing a new version of the entire platform. So we'll be continuing to come out with new features for the hub over the coming months, and some of that work is already underway. All right, let me show you a bit of a demo on this. Let's go here. I'm going to jump into, I got to find the right page, sorry. So I have here an Entando 7.2 instance. If you don't recall, there is this area that shows you which version of Entando you are running. That was added in Entando 7.0 maybe. So you can always figure out what version of Entando you have in front of you. And I have a lot of environments, so I use that a lot myself. So I'm going to go to a publish page here. This is just a hub. 3.1 is the current targeted release that will be coming out with hub, this new version of the hub, and it looks fairly familiar. This is, like I said, a demo environment. Doesn't have a lot of content in it. It's only got one entry in this catalog. The new feature is now we have a set of catalogs, and I'm logged in right now as an admin, so I can see both my catalog and a private catalog for one of my partners. So Acme is the partner or the client. If I log in as a different user, so let me jump out to a different user case here. So this is the public view. There's exactly one entry visible in the catalog. Let me go log in as a partner. So as a partner, I can come in and now I can switch over and look at my private catalog. So I have some different entries in here. These are showing as published, but they're only visible to me or people within my organization. Okay, that's the first feature. So I now have an area that's dedicated to me, to my client, to the organization is how it's managed here in the platform. I also have the ability to go in. I can do a couple different things. I can also say, hey, when I'm editing one of these entries in the catalog, do I want to include in the public catalog? I can make it visible to anybody now. So if I switch over, I change this one to a public catalog view, and I go look at this public catalog. Now I can say, hey, I'm going to start doing some development. I'm going to build some things with Entando. I'm going to put them into my catalog. For now, we're not going to share them with the world. But later on, I can say, well, now it's ready. I want to put it out there. We can make it visible. You can still do all the things you could have done before. You can say that, yeah, installing it requires somebody to pay me for it. We'll let them use it for free up to a certain point, whatever you like in terms of that licensing model. But you have the option to do that. And you can share it then into our public catalog and get the word out there in the public view. The other thing you can do in the hub is you can also go in and you can manage your keys. So this is kind of very similar to what you see on GitHub or Atlassian, as I mentioned. I can go generate an API key, give it a name, it'll show you the key, and won't show it to you later because that's typically how these things work. You can use that key then within the app builder. So let me show you that view for a second here. I'm going to jump back into the app builder. I just want to show you that view. Okay. Oop, they grabbed the wrong user. Yep. The user who has access to the app builder, that will help me. All right. All right, so I'm now logged in back as the admin user, and now I'm going to go to my app builder. Okay. So this part hasn't changed a lot, but what is new now is if I go in here, I can see private catalogs can also be connected up. So I'll edit this one just for a second. So I have a couple different catalogs, hubs connected. I have the public cloud hub. We have instructions on developer.entando.com. Hopefully you're familiar with that as our place for all the developer technical configuration information. All that's out there with all of our tutorials. That the way to set up a hub, your own hub, is all documented there. And the way to set these things up is also provided. So this is our public cloud hub. This is one of our internal registries as well. And the new feature is now I can go in and I can configure a private catalog, in which case I need to provide an API key. And there's a bit of a format here to say which catalog do I want to get access to. Once you've done that, which I've already done in this environment, I can then switch my view over and I can pull those entries from my private catalog. And that's what you get here. This is the same view we saw a second ago looking at the front-end experience. So I can deploy these, I can manage them, all the same experience as a hub. Once I've deployed them, you'll see them in your local hub, which are the things that are actually deployed into that Entando project or namespace in Kubernetes. Okay, so those are the main features for the Hub 3. A lot more things under the hood, usability things. There's a bunch of other fixes, but those are the main feature to call out is that private catalog capability. All right, let me close this guy. We're going to go on to the next thing. All right, so multi-tenancy. So the situation today with tenancy or the ability to segregate users and their content, digital assets, all the things that are in Entando. This is a situation up until Entando 7.2, unless you happen to be one of our special clients where we've already done some of this multi-tenancy work. So as a product, prior to Entando 7.2, if you had different groups of users with their own requirements and their own data, you're a little limited. You had two options. Try to make it work within Entando, and we have some permission options, so you can do some things in the app builder and the app engine. You can do some things, but it doesn't have all the power you'd like, because and it doesn't segregate the data. And usually in multi-tenancy, you're looking at separating the data, the users, all that from other users, from other tenants in the implementation. So the difficulties here are, well, the one positive is this is one stack, right? The negatives are permissioning can be a little challenging. You don't have data separation for your users or your content. A big thing is if you have different requirements for those tenants, you've also got to deal with what do I do there? I have to build stuff that can work across different tenants. you can't really monitor it because it's one big application with different groups of users, and it's hard to monitor it. And the obvious answer to that, and what our answer has been up until this point, is if you really have those issues, permissions, data segregation, different requirements, you need to monitor it separately, well, you're going to stand up a different stack. You'll have a different Entando application. And we've had clients and partners managing many Entando applications, and sometimes in cases where they just had a small site they wanted to add into Entando. It wasn't even a huge application. It was a small microsite with a dozen pages and a few users, but they want to have it be its own little space. It's got its own domain name, and they want to do some specific things with that, right? So at that point, the cost gets high because now I'm installing a complete Entando stack, and I'm paying for all of that, even though this thing is fairly underutilized probably. You don't need all that power for a small site, a small application. So the answer typically is you go towards a multi-tenancy model, okay? Where you still have all the tenants coming into the Entando platform, but their data goes, in this case, this diagram, which I've lifted from Microsoft, the data goes to a tenant database. And I'll talk to you about those components and what those things look like in a second. But you've now got the ability to use the same platform to serve multiple tenants with their own views with data that is separated, okay? So there's some positives here, right? You have dedicated resources. You have an easier ability to scale. You've got more flexibility. You can monitor the tenant specifically, and I'll show you how that works a little bit. And because I'm using one Entando stack, I've got much lower cost. I can run, in our performance testing, we ran up to 50 tenants in a single Entando instance with a reasonable set of resources and a couple hundred transactions a second, okay? So small sites, but quite a few of them in the same instance. But only with one Entando implementation, one project, one namespace, and in Kubernetes. Okay, so that lowers your cost quite a bit. You're not duplicating everything in the stack anymore. All right, it's a little extra complexity, and I'll talk you through that a little bit. And there is one limit on composability, and I'll come back and show you what that means right now for this initial release of Entando multi-tenancy. So let me show you what this looks like in practice, and then we'll go and I'll give you a couple more diagrams on how it all works together. So I'm going to jump into another one of our environments. In this case, you'll see this MT720 multi-tenancy 720 environment. This is a kind of a plain vanilla Entando. It's what the page you get when you first install Entando 7.2, right? I can go in, I can log in. If I jump into the app builder, this is going to be tenant 1. Sometimes we call it tenant 1. If you look in the documentation, once it's released, sometimes we call it the primary tenant, which will be the first tenant in the implementation. This is the primary tenant, or tenant 1. This looks just like what you'd get in a standalone dedicated Entando installation. The first user, the first tenant in your application gets all the power. They've got access to the hub. They've got access to user management. They've got their own pages, right? This looks like a dedicated standalone Entando instance, okay? This is an internal test environment with multi-tenancy enabled, so you see some test content in here. In the same environment, I can jump in, and now you'll see the URL has changed, right? Typically, prior to Entando 7.2, that would mean this is a different Entando application. In this case, it's not. It's a separate tenant in the same Entando implementation. So if I log into this guy, and this is an old portal demo content set that we had that's loaded into the second tenant, tenant 20. So when I come in here, I get my usual inline edit options. I can also go to the app builder, tenant 20, yes. When I jump in here, I'm going to see no evidence of the other users. I'm logged in as admin. I'm logged in as admin in this instance. And I'll talk to you about what those pieces are, like how do we manage that, right? But when I logged into the other one, it didn't prompt me for the welcome wizard. When I go look at the page tree, it is pretty much what I saw on that homepage. When I go look at the user list, it's different in this environment. It happens to just be one user in this tenant, okay? But the look and feel, still standard Entando, but it's actually one Entando application behind it. Okay, the third case we have same Entando application. I picked one of the ones where we've loaded up a copy of, I'm looking at the data on it. This was probably a copy from February, I'm guessing, of the Entando.com website. Still the same Entando instance, but now in this case, the 31st tenant in this environment, because we had 50 in this one. This was one of the ones that was used for performance testing and all that. So here, if I log in, again, actually different password, different user here, and I go look at the app builder. I'll get the view that matches this tenant, okay? It's one app builder, but now my view is, this is all the content that lives on Entando.com or did back in February. If I go look at the user set, I actually don't recall what's in the users here. Some of our users were carried over. This was actually a copy, so some of my partners, I can see your names in here. We won't dwell on that one too much. That we didn't copy Keycloak over, so their credentials don't work. There's no sensitive data in here, but it was a copy of our production server. I sanitized a little bit for use in performance testing. Okay, what you won't see is in these secondary tenants 20 and 31, is you won't see the hub in here, and that's a limitation right now for this initial release of multi-tenancy. This will allow you to say, hey, I've got one primary tenant. They get full access to composability. They can install bundles. They can take those PPCs and make them available. Once they've installed them on the primary, the secondary has the option to drag and drop them on pages. They get access to the widgets if they're deployed, that kind of stuff. And so if the PBCs, if these bundles will play nice across tenants, so if they're either they don't care about multi-tenancy, they work fine. Like we have many things that are, they're content driven, or they're simple widgets, or they call external services. You could deploy those at as many tenants as you want to. Other PBCs we have, they require microservices. They have their own data. Maybe they work fine. Maybe you want to share that. You could have that in tenants 1, 5, and 8 and deploy them on pages and give access to those in those other tenants. There may be cases where you have a business capability that really should only be used by the primary, and you wouldn't share it across tenants, but you have some options there. What you don't have in this first version of multi-tenancy is we don't provide the option for the secondary tenants to install all their own stuff. That's maybe a positive and a negative, but it is where we are today. Okay, it's a bit of multi-tenancy. If you trust me, I can show you the Kubernetes view if you want to see it to actually believe me that this is all in one Entando instance, because it doesn't look like it, right? It could be smoke and mirrors, but it's not. I promise you, this is one Entando application. So let's talk through the components that are included. So the major components, and then we'll talk through what it looks like at the tenant level. So I already mentioned that the app engine itself is now Apache Tomcat based for performance and clustering reasons. There were several reasons we went down that road. We still have Keycloak. That was there. Obviously, we bumped up the version on that for Entando 7.2. I'll talk to you a little bit about how you configure it to manage the tenants. Previously, Redis was also something you could do as an add-on. We have a tutorial for enabling Redis for if you want to have multiple replicas, which typically you're going to in enterprise situations. That was the one main requirement, that and modifying the storage type for any volumes. That's the requirement for high availability. If you want to do multiple replicas of the Entando app engine, previously we would say, yeah, just turn on Redis, make sure your storage type is good, and you're good to go. These things are all required now for multi-tenancy. So if you want to go beyond high availability and also support multiple tenants, Redis needs to be in there as well. Apache Solr was also an option previously. We're working on the tutorial for that, so you can do that very easily. A bunch of our clients were using it for enterprise search. When you do multiple replicas, if you're using enterprise search, you need to use Solr. It's also required for multi-tenancy. The last piece is new. We've put together, got to give a lot of credit to the team that was working on this. We're calling it the Content Delivery Server. It's CDS. This is for managing static resources. Remember, we're trying to segregate the data between the tenants. And so that includes assets that are delivered as part of a micro front end. If you go in and create digital assets in the app builder, you need a place to store those on the server. All right, those go into CDS. It's based in Rust. It's an ActX web server, so it's very fast, lightweight. That is one thing. You will have one of those per tenant because you need a place to serve those and its own volume to make sure the data is segregated. Okay, so that's your major components. Here's how they work together. We're going to send out the deck. We're going to send out the recording so you can kind of look through this and make sure you understand it if you're interested in this thing. But I wanted to call it what's shared and what's tenant specific. So what is shared is the App Engine. So if you're running 5 replicas of the App Engine to serve all the load you've got, you're going to get one App Engine, even in a multi-tenant situation. Same thing for the App Builder. Same thing for Redis. You're going to use one Redis for the caching, clustering, and stores. What you'll have that's tenant specific will be the domains. It can be a subdomain. It could be a fully qualified domain. Like I was using subdomains here, right? MT720, tenant 20, MT720. Like these are subdomains right now in this environment. You can also use fully qualified domains. That's what's used when traffic comes in on domain 1, tenant 1, domain 1, whatever. When these things come in, it's that URL that's used to identify, all right, what tenant do we activate? How do we load data? The App Engine, the App Builder, Redis are all aware of that. We inject some logic to say, yep, let's connect you to the right stuff. And in our tutorial, we'll walk you through how do you configure that so that stuff works. Okay. So the domain is the key, right? That's the one that helps you select your tenant. Below that, you will have a database schema or a full instance if you want to configure it like an external database. You'll get a Keycloak realm or an instance, so you can choose either one. Our tutorial by default will show you how to do an individual realm in Keycloak. You'll add an individual Solar core when you're configuring enterprise search, and you'll have one CDS instance for managing that static asset area in the application. Okay, this will be a lot clearer. Probably if you start playing with your tutorials, want to do multi-tenancy and work through it, you'll see all that. Okay. All right, that's the 2 major features. I want to give you a bit of a demo on those so you have at least a sense of what you can do with that. I already called out for you that the full composability is available to that first tenant. They're special. The first one, which is effectively the default Entando install, with a couple of tweaks to activate the tenant behavior. That first client is going to be special. They get more power than the others. Okay, that's the one caveat for you. All right, let's go on to what's next. I suspect most people know that is what Entando means in the Sardinian language, is what's next. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a forecast here. I'm not sure this slide is completely appropriate sometimes, but if you've seen the movie, but this is a bit of a forecast on 7.3, right? So it's not exact. We're just finishing up 7.2. We are starting to work on the analysis for 7.3. What typically happens is during this next quarter, we're going to learn some new things in conversation with you. You'll start working with Entando 7.2. We may change priorities. So not necessarily everything that I'll describe may be in 7.3. So I have to provide that. The product team makes me promise to give you that caveat. I can give you the direction, but I don't know if the exact feature list won't change before 7.3. And you have the ability to influence that with your feedback. So there's 3 major themes for 7.3. The first, not surprising, is around composability. So we've done a number of implementations in the last 6 months, and we've identified a few things that we really like to pull in and enhance in the platform. So micro front ends, there's some things that we'd like to do around communication channels, a shell behavior, probably an example design system. Right now, if you're building multiple components within Entando, getting the design to match isn't as easy as it should be. So maybe we'll use Daisy UI for that, but we'd like to have an example for you on how you can do that. We want to take the bundle specification. If you've already been building Entando 7.1 bundles, the Entando JSON is that specification for what goes into a bundle, right? It gives you the list of microservices, micro front ends, the other components that can be in your bundle. We need to make some enhancements there to support real world enterprise needs when you're deploying those bundles. That includes making resource requests. Hey, this microservice, if you're creating a microservice, I need to tell the application and let the user installing it know that this application needs more, this microservice needs more CPU, or it needs more memory, that kind of thing, maybe more storage. So we're looking at enhancing the specs so that you can guide that. You could already do it by hand after the fact, like tweak those after you've deployed things. We want to make that part of the flow so the person creating those microservices has an ability to ask for that. There's a kind of a list of things in this area. The second one I called out is more ability to use API claims. If you've been using Entando 7.1, you know that you can configure a micro front end with an API claim to a microservice. It's quite nice. It is a bit of an abstraction, which lets you say, this microservice depends on that. Sorry, this micro front end depends on that named microservice. And then at runtime, Entando helps wire them together, right? It's, again, one more way that we're trying to automate, make the life easier for the developer. You can just say, I depend on that thing, and then Entando takes care of the wiring as you move things into different environments. So we want to enhance that. There's a few places that giving that same API claim behavior in the application would be useful. So we're looking at that. We're also considering putting upgrading, reskinning, I'm not sure the right term there, the page template editor. That's one area that's a little bit dated now. We'd like to refresh it. We'll see if we can fold that in. We'd like to get that in there as well, because as a composer, when you're building the application, that tends to be one area that's a little bit annoying to work with, and we'd like to improve that experience a bit. Okay, so that's the first theme, composability. Second theme is around security. So again, the first bullet here is picking up some lessons we've learned in real world implementations, improving our role-based access control configuration options. So how things work in Keycloak versus in the application, trying to make that easier on the development team. Second is another round of features for the hub. That includes some version control, some security checks. That should be quite nice in terms of providing visibility to what is included in those capabilities that are published in the catalog, and are they really ready to publish, right? So when you're the curator and you go into the catalog and somebody says, hey, I built this cool new thing, as a curator who's saying yes or no, publish this thing and make it available to our clients, your clients, maybe even internally to a specific client. How do you know that it's good? Did it have security scans? Did it have code checks of some form? What's been done, right? Trying to provide more visibility on there, some more integration with CI/CD so you have ability to do that. Third topic is around API gateways. This comes up a lot. In the past, we've said, you can do API gateways, you just add your own. We're trying to provide more support there. We might do one with open source API 6 as a reference implementation. There's still some conversation on what that might look like. We're also talking about securing the supply chain a bit more than we have currently. Maybe co-signing at least the major images from Entando, App Engine, App Builder, those kinds of things that get deployed into Kubernetes, signing those so that we have more security around. You know that we said this is what it is, and you can validate it at deployment time to make sure you're actually getting the images that we provided, that no man in the middle got in there and injected anything that we don't know about, right? I hesitate to say it, knock on wood, we've never had a supply chain hack on our chain. We have a lot of security stuff already baked in. This is one more place that provides confidence if you have that in there, right, to do those kinds of checks. It's a step towards zero trust. There's a lot of conversation in the community around zero trust architectures. This doesn't get us quite there, but it is starting to think that way. How do we supply things, secure things all in the supply chain? All right, so second theme is security. Third theme is around kind of enterprise runtime stuff. So if you've seen AWS Graviton, if you've got a newer MacBook and you wanted to try to install Entando on it, you've got an M1 or M2 chip, you weren't able to previously. So we're looking now at enhancing our pipelines, enhancing the CLI. We'll need some changes as well so that we can support multiple architecture. So that would include ARM support. So that would allow you, if you see the documentation from AWS, they think Graviton can reduce your cloud cost by, I forget, 40% or something. Right? So being able to run Entando on that would be key. Now, when it comes to the bundles that are created, there may be extra requirements. You know, will they support it as well? I don't know. In the initial analysis, it looks like Keycloak won't be a problem, but Red Hat SSO has not yet released a version that is ARM compatible. They've got a multi-architecture image that has some support, but not for ARM yet. So we probably will be releasing this with Keycloak, but then waiting on Red Hat SSO to catch up and have it there as well. So we'll note that in the release notes once we get there. But that's where we are in the initial analysis. We've had this request for a while, and so we're finally prioritizing that. Also looking at improving things with the tooling for CI/CD. how do you do continuous integration, whether that's Jenkins, Tekton, GitHub Actions, whatever your preferred CI/CD tooling is. We did in the last quarter containerize the end CLI. That's usually the first step, that you can then use the CLI to assemble everything in the application, in your bundles. And so we're looking to standardize that, get that as part of our release process, so you can easily use that in your build pipelines. Also looking at some more things around making the app engine lighter, easier to use, and also some things around processes. How do you patch an existing Entando application? How do you upgrade it? Back in Entando 7.0, we added liquid-based support for automatically updating the databases connected to Entando. Looking now to say, well, how do we do something similar where you can update the images that if we issue a patch release, how do you automatically do that in an easy way? So looking to improve that as well in this next version. Now, I didn't mention timing. We are trying to be engineering complete by midsummer, probably ahead of the Italian. A lot of our engineering team is in Italy, ahead of the break in August, with potentially a release of 7.3 in September. That's our current plan. But as I said, the forecast may change. Okay, you listened to me talk quickly. Let me check and see if we have any questions. That's the bit of the forecast for you, those 3 major themes. This is your opportunity. If you have any questions, please drop those in the chat, and I'd be happy to address anything you have. And of course, you know where to find us. Slack, email, talk to your rep over here at Entando if you have questions that we didn't address. But does anybody want to ask anything on the call now? I got to pause for uncomfortable silence for a minute.
Are there any questions? So someone wanted to, please, good update, Nathan. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Got one of our Canadian partners on the call. Thanks, Chris. All right. Well, you know where to hunt us down. Community Slack's an easy place. Email, you know how to find us. We appreciate all of our partners. Obviously, you're doing a lot of great work out there. And as you have feedback, as you start playing with 7.2, once we release it here, please make sure to reach out and let us know. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Thursday.
Thank you for your time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.